Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was a bloodthirsty ninja. Lies have power. They can change a simple-minded believer into a two-faced schemer and a timid follower into a fanatical devotee. They can change a child angry at the world into a man consumed by more than vengeance. But that power is a lie as well. Welcome aboard! Chapter 4, Client's Lie, 1. Team 7, Iruka called. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto sat up slightly straighter. Finally. Hinata Hyuga. Thanks, Naruto muttered under his breath. He'd specifically asked to be partnered with Hinata. After all, she was the one who'd saved his life. They worked well together. Sasuke Uchiha. What the hell? He said out loud. Client's lie. Sasuke, break left. The cat just hid under the little bush, but Kota is shadowing you at 5 o'clock. Naruto's voice sounded even and unhurried, but I knew what our opponents didn't. It was really Hinata, hinged into him. I guess her own opponent, Ken, wasn't pushing her yet. I moved left, as suggested, tossing 2 Senbon with tiny flash bombs attached over my shoulder, and quickly set myself to cover the straightest trail leading away from the bush, should the cat try to bolt. Kota was behind a tree when I threw the Senbon, so he wouldn't have seen them. Heavy rustling in the trees to my right revealed a half-dozen Narutos spreading out in a circle to herd the cat, and 3 more with their attention directed the opposite direction, no doubt on the watch for Ken. At least one of them was Hinata, and one of them might be Naruto, just like it was just as likely they were all clones. Abruptly, Hinata, and even I didn't know if it was really Naruto or just a clone, scampered along tree branches on the other side of the cat, flinging kunai at Kamita, who was hot on her trail. I couldn't get used to the stupid names Naruto came up with. All of our enemies today were clones, hinged into caricatures of bandits or shinobi. Their mission was to kill the cat. Our mission was to capture it, alive. This was Naruto's solution to the problem of Kakashi-sensei frequently being off on other duties, leaving us to complete these simple D-rank missions by ourselves. Simple-minded thinking from the liar. I wouldn't have resented it nearly as much if I didn't know his clones would actually kill the cat if we failed. Fail Naruto's training, fail the real mission as well. Hinata just nodded and agreed, like she always did to Naruto's suggestions, leaving me to put up with their antics. Flash, I said quietly into my radio, then closed my eyes and triggered the 2 flash bombs at the feet of my opponent. The clone reeled in shock and blindness as I darted around behind him, then plunged a kunai in his back. It disappeared with a burst of smoke. Once, I'd stabbed Naruto that way, when he'd been hiding as a clone. The memory made me smile. Damn it, Sasuke. His voice crackled over the radio. The idea was to have to fight them the whole way. I smirked, pleased. But I will admit I was impressed when suddenly Hinata changed course, her opponent still following, and shadowed the fleeing, panicked cat from above as her opponent threw Senbon, effortlessly weaving and dodging around the needles. Only the real Hinata could do that, so how was Naruto? Ah. Kawarimi. Naruto as Hinata had swapped places with the real Hinata, each dropping their henge as they did so, seamlessly taking the place of the other. That struck me as a really good idea. The enemy could get used to fighting one with a certain fighting style, then if he suddenly spotted a weakness or the fighting styles were a poor match, a substitution could be made, surprising the enemy with all new skills. Damn that Naruto. Kamita was closing with Hinata, and I knew from previous experience that she would abide by Naruto's restrictions and not kill the clone. So, I did it for her with a flicked kunai, and kept pace to shield her from other enemies. Great, Sasuke. Naruto called. Great? A moment ago, he was cursing me for disrupting his plan. Show some consistency, you planless bastard. A split second after that, Hinata landed in front of the startled cat and snatched it from the ground with one lightning grab. Taju Kage Bushin no Jutsu. What? I glanced back, and Naruto fled? At the front of a huge pack of clones, all throwing Senbon at him, a veritable hail of needles. The first wave struck, and a moment later a log, spiked with Senbon, was trampled under the feet of over 3 dozen clones. I couldn't fight that many all at once. Naruto was too close to my own skill for me to take him on in numbers. But I had to keep them from reaching Hinata. I moved to intercept. Naruto suddenly stood in my path, moving quickly enough I hadn't seen him until he emerged from behind a tree and leaped. "Wait, Sasuke," he said, moving his left hand over his head in an over-me gesture. The clone army obediently leapt over us in a wave, a rainbow of Narutos, though the only colors represented were orange and black. I glanced at him as I followed the wave moving towards Hinata. "She's been working on something new, some family technique. This is a good time to test it," he offered, not looking at me. Together, we leapt for a good view of the upcoming fight. I did not often interfere in his treatment of Hinata. It was their business. My own thoughts on the matter. Well, Hinata was certainly getting stronger. She could even land hits on Kakashi-sensei if he fought close. I know Hinata saw the incoming wave of Narutos, and I believe she knew that it couldn't be good for her. I just barely caught a glimpse of her as she shoved the screaming, hissing cat inside her gray jacket and pulled on the drawstrings, temporarily trapping the cat inside as she took some sort of formal stance. Then, as the first wave of inbound Senbon reached her, she seemed to blur, even to my eyes. "Hakurokujuyan Sho," Naruto said quietly, sensing my interest. "Some family technique she's been working on, but she's trying to use a variation." I didn't know what the variation was, but as I watched Hinata start slowly turning in a circle, her torso whipping like mad in all directions and her arms a windmill around her, sending Senbon flying by harmlessly or deflecting them away, I marked it as something I intended to learn. Without an area effect jutsu, I'd be hard-pressed to avoid that many Senbon, myself. "It's weak as defense," Naruto muttered, seeming somewhat disappointed. Harsh. But true. She wasn't using her feet for anything but movement, and her movements were taxed as she sought to deflect the needles aimed at her legs as well. Additionally, if she was that fast, she should be catching the Senbon and sending them back at the attackers. That would be a technique worth knowing. And, slowly, kunai began to be mixed into the hundreds of Senbon hurtling towards the kunoichi. I knew Hinata was helplessly in love with Naruto. I knew he knew it as well. Well. But unlike me, he actually returned some of her attention. When I first met them, I thought that, despite their skills, they would be a hindrance to me, too wrapped up in pointless things like love to fight. I will admit, I was wrong. Hinata followed his orders, as I knew the liar wanted me to, but she would offer up her opinions on things as well. And no one, not me, not Kakashi-sensei, was harder on her when training. Here I stood, watching Naruto do his best to kill the girl in love with him. He'd do it, too. I had no doubt. A smile tugged at my face as I imagined myself throwing the kunai and some of the more insistent girls who chased me in the middle of that rain of steel. "Glad you're enjoying the show," he said mockingly. I scowled and looked back at Hinata. "She lost to you in less than 5 minutes yesterday," Naruto continued. 5 minutes, yeah. She wasn't on my level yet, though she was easily the best kunoichi to come from our class, and probably better than most of the males. Naruto might be on my level. One of these days, I'd press the issue. I was curious how long it'd take me to beat him. Both of our eyes widened as there was suddenly a change in the pattern of deflection. Her movements weren't as smooth, not quite as quick. She's taken. I hit, I finished. She's got to improve if she's going to be anything but a set of eyes for us, Naruto said grimly. And the quickest way to improve is to fight for your life against impossible odds. He took a deep breath. Don't lose, Hinata. He shouted, and with a roar from the clones, the rain of deadly steel doubled. Naruto wore 2 pouches these days, and even with dozens and dozens of clones, he must have packed them to the very limit with Sunban, which he rarely used. For training like this, it made sense. Despite his lethal intent, I doubt he really wanted to kill her, and Sunban did the least damage of the 3 common thrown weapons. Hinata's movements changed again and again, brief bits of hesitation, a gradual slowing, a redoubling of efforts, as she was hit again and again. Her spin grew faster, her legs dancing, and she began slowly winding through the trees, trying to get out of the circle of clones. With luck, and, admittedly, a bit of skill on the Hyuga's part, none of the needles or knives would hit the struggling cat in her jacket. Without so much a warning as a slight decrease in volume, the attack suddenly stopped, and Hinata stopped her mad whirl, one arm extended, the other crooked back and to one side. She was perfectly still, except for the rustling and yowling under her jacket that said the cat was still alive, and very, very unhappy. Her left forearm had nearly half a dozen needles buried in it, for in her back, and the worst looking but least disabling was one stuck right in her left cheek, close to her mouth. I kept my face impassive. Way to go Dash. She exploded into motion, and suddenly, for a shining moment, the air was alive with Sunban flowing outwards, and then she wasn't there anymore. 24 clones died in an instant as the Sunban hit, their speed leaving Hinata's hands far greater than anything the clones had managed. And then she was among them, and she began to kill. Naruto's words choked off, then he recovered. Not bad. I suppose that makes up for the pitiful technique. And she kept the cat safe, so we didn't even fail the mission. I frowned at him. The fool really needed to come up with a way to train his pet kunoichi that didn't run the risk of us failing a mission. Even AD. I did not intend to be on a team that failed missions. Hinata landed in front of us heavily. Naturally, since she had to be exhausted. With quick, jerky movements, she opened the front of her jacket, removed the flailing cat, and hurled it at Naruto with a convulsive movement. Naruto came alive as the cat flew at him, and with a deftness close to my own, the cat was quickly wrapped up in cloth and tied, only its screaming head left in the open. Hinata sank to her knees and breathed heavily. I saw that all of the Sunban, even the ones in her back, had been removed already, doubtlessly thrown at the tormenting Naruto clones. The little hole in her cheek was bleeding. Her lips were red with her blood, and with her pale skin framed in dark hair, she looked like a geisha with powdered skin and painted lips. It actually looked good on her. Naruto pulled medical supplies from his black and orange jacket. Come on, let's see how bad it is. Hinata hesitated, looking at me. Odd. But, after that inscrutable look, she slipped off her jacket. Oh. That was it. Instead of a normal shirt, underneath she wore fine armored mesh and a brief, very brief, set of wrappings around her breasts for support. I was reminded forcibly that she also had the largest breasts of any kunoichi our age. But she also had dozens of short, ragged lines across her breasts and stomach, cuts from the cat's claws that wept blood, red standing out starkly against black wire mesh and pale white skin. I did not blush. But I did turn away, giving her some privacy. Kind of moot, Sasuke, Naruto said as he worked. We may not have yet, but we will eventually be given long missions in the field together. Can't turn your back on a comrade, any halfway decent ninja would look for an opportunity like that. From the sound of things, I believe he slipped her mesh armor off, and then I could swear I heard cloth rustle as chest wrappings fell away. I did not look. But a mental image came to mind, and I willed it to go away. I don't mind you seeing, Hinata said quietly. But I knew she did mind. Only one person could make her say something like that. Naruto. I had to get out of here. I'll carry the cat back and turn it in, I volunteered, picking up the squirming feline. Wait, we're supposed to complete missions as a team dash, he protested, but I was already leaping away. I think we made him uncomfortable, Hinata-chan? Naruto said lightly as they watched the last Uchiha flee through the trees. Hinata nodded shyly and swallowed the hot, coppery blood leaking in from her cheek. She was blushing furiously, and if anything, that made the hole in her cheek bleed even more. Fortunately, despite the fact the needle had pierced her cheek, she'd actually caught it with a snap of her jaw, which kept it from burying itself in the back of her throat or knocking out teeth. Naruto sighed theatrically. I swear, that guy is so uptight, if you shoved a lump of coal up his ass and showed him a tit, you'd have a diamond. Hinata giggled at the thought, then hissed as Naruto applied a harsh-smelling antiseptic ointment to the ragged scratches on her breasts and stomach. But other than tightening her muscles at the sting, she made no motion to get away, resist, or even cover her chest, even when his callous thumb traced a long, curving cut that came within an inch of her left nipple. She wondered what he thought of the underoutfit she'd picked out for the day. Tell me what you need to work on, he ordered quietly, not pausing his treatments. She nodded seriously. Footwork. I was too slow to move outside the kill zone. I also need to be able to deflect with my feet. Juken doesn't use kicks, so if I go against my family and use kicks, I will have an advantage. She waited to see how he would respond, licking blood from her lips. Really, despite the massive amount of chakra she'd just expended forcing herself to move so fast, she wasn't too tired. Kneeling in front of Naruto, bare from the waist up, her breasts on display, it was all very exciting. She couldn't quite stop the thrill that ran up her spine. She was sure Naruto noticed it, and she blushed more. Naruto always noticed how she was feeling. You also need to be faster with your hands. If you'd caught the Senbon and used them for attack, you could have quickly reduced the attackers to a manageable level, Naruto admonished. She flushed. But you said not to kill your clones. Abruptly his hand had her chin in a grip like steel, and he turned her so he could look her directly in the eye. When your life is on the line, rules do not matter. Do what it takes. Her white eyes watered, and her breath came in short hitches and gasps. She nodded as best she could with her chin in his hand. I need you, he added after a moment, his grip easing, his face softening. Don't die on me now. Her heart skipped a beat. He leaned in and kissed her, licking her own blood from her lips with his tongue. She would have swooned, but Naruto didn't put up with that sort of behavior. He let her go. His lips were stained red. So how much damage did you take in your arm? He asked, breaking the spell. She gasped, then touched her lips, her finger coming away tinged pink. Oh. Very little. I couldn't catch them all, but I could move where they would hit and cause the least damage. No tendons, no blood vessels, just muscle tissue and skin. She paused, then added, the same with my back. Naruto nodded. I'll get there in a minute. First I'll wrap your arm. He used more ointment, then wrapped her forearms, both of them, in cotton bandages, all the way down to her hands, which were also nicked and scratched from contact with sharp points and edges as she slapped kunai and Senbon away, despite careful application of chakra. His control was rock solid, despite the interesting things moving her arms did to her other assets. But Hyuga were trained to notice eye movement. Rather than being embarrassed that he looked, she felt pride. He liked her body, and wouldn't let her believe that she was plain and dark. Naruto said she was the most beautiful girl in Konoha, and Naruto was the only opinion that mattered. Her back he took his time with, massaging medicine into the deep muscle tissue of her back while she lolled her head in obvious pleasure, and as he applied sticky bandages to each of the puncture wounds, he kissed the side of her neck. She arched the side of her neck into his kiss as the massage turned from working soreness out of her muscles into gentle caresses that left her skin pricking and sensitive. Naruto might have caused her to be hurt more than any other person in her life, including her father, but he also never failed to make it up to her, in some ways equaling the pain with pleasure. She had lost her body modesty months before. Now, she just wanted him. He slid around in front of her again to dress her cheek, dabbing a powdered blood-clotting agent into the hole in her cheek, which stopped the bleeding almost instantly. Her good behavior faded, though, as she began stroking her cheeks against his hands as he attempted to dress the wound, her eyes half-lidded as she kissed his fingers. Blood and medicine and the faint fishy tang of the blood-clotting agent, and Naruto kneeling there, looking at her with that mature, ageless face she loved so much. He smiled at her as he finished, then held his arms wide in invitation. She practically swarmed into his lap. Despite being slightly shorter, he always made her feel like the most petite girl wrapped in his big strong arms. He chuckled good-naturedly at her antics as he turned the conversation over to Sasuke and how they would deal with him, and she missed the predatory gleam in his eye, despite her focus on him. She'd already offered herself to him. One day, he'd take her. Hinata woke gasping and flushed, biting her sheet as she writhed on her narrow futon. For several long moments, all she could do was lie there, breathing deeply until her heart calmed. Wow. Now that was a dream. But it was starting to get light outside, and she could use the labeled training dummies while most of her clan were still asleep. It would go a long way towards reinforcing her image as a dutiful but somewhat inept and worthless daughter. She had an image to maintain after all. So, leaving her sweaty, tangled sheets behind, she slipped on a pair of shorts and a shirt and stepped into the cool morning, leaving behind her dreams of how she and Naruto would christen his office desk when he became Hokage. I woke up to the sound of a rock bouncing off my window. Repressing a groan, I rose and grabbed my clothes, intending to slip out the front while the annoying person stared at my window. No such luck. Hey, Sasuke. Wake up. Oh, it was Naruto. Well, it certainly could have been worse. Last time this happened, it was some brown-haired academy girl in glasses, with a scroll of poetry she'd written about me. Creepy. It wasn't even that bad of poetry. Kunoichi training or not, it took some talent to have a passage with the line "I want to bathe you with my tongue in iambic pentameter." Was even kind of sensual. But creepy. Yes, definitely creepy. Oi, Uchiha. The tapping on my window grew faster, and with some irritation I twitched the curtains out of the way to reveal Naruto hanging off the outside wall, rapping with one knuckle. Instead of his usual orange and black clothes, he was wearing shorts and a white t-shirt. What? I asked, not bothering to hide my irritation. How would you like a free meal? He asked seriously. I just looked at him. Oh, come on, I'm offering you a job, not trying to seduce you, he complained. At least open the window and hear me out. HN. I walked away to start getting dressed. I usually showered at night. Kept my bed cleaner. Damn it, Sasuke. I put on a fresh shirt. I didn't have to see him to imagine that frustrated expression he put on when things didn't go the way he wanted, though, since I wasn't looking, I wondered if he bothered. Alright. Just listen. You've got to be tired of these pathetic D-rank missions Kakashi's giving us, right? HN. He took that as encouragement. Yeah, me, too. So, I've been doing a little reconnaissance, a little mission planning. And I think I know what mission we're supposed to get today. I didn't say anything. I had clean shorts laying around here somewhere. So, I propose we get it before they contract it out. It's an easy job if we use jutsu, but knowing Kakashi-sensei, he'll tell us not to and it'll take all damned afternoon. But if we go knock it out this morning on the side, not only will we still get the money, it'll be easier, and we might get something more interesting this afternoon. He paused. Or nothing at all, which would be cool, too. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. 'Cause I was gonna tell you yesterday after we turned in the cat, but you ran off, he said a bit petulantly. It's your fault I had to find you this morning. HN. Now for shoes. Look, the job is clearing a lot on the edge of town. It's covered in brush and there's a lot of bricks and stuff on the ground. I get Hinata, but she's doing some sort of family thing this morning, and you've got better skills for it anyway. Just hit it with a fireball and I'll pick up everything. I glanced at the window. He smiled at me. Hey, I've already talked to the people, and they'll give us each a 7-course meal ticket to Ishitoba's. That's better than D-rank pay any day. One Ketan Jutsu in a few minutes with my Kagebushin and we're done. That was pretty tempting. Ishitoba's was high-end. Alright, I agreed. Great. He said enthusiastically, then paused, looking at me. After a moment, I got irritated. What? I asked curtly. Are you gonna get ready? I am ready, fool. He looked contrite. Oh. I thought you still needed to comb your hair. I ground my teeth. Hinata kneeled primly at the low table, using nothing but pure will to ignore the soreness in her shoulder muscles and arm as she served herself a bowl of rice and some grilled fish. She also poured a cup of steaming tea, and took a drink. Her sister, Hanabi, kneeled on the opposite side of the table, ignoring her own food at the moment while she stared at Hinata. Hinata asked. Hanabi-chan? She just stared. Hinata-nichan, your face, it's leaking. She said quietly, and her eyes kept sliding away, indicating discomfort. Hinata felt of her at her lips, then felt the trickle of tea hit her jawline. She blushed and dabbed at it with a napkin. Oh. Thank you, Hanabi-chan. I didn't know. Hanabi's chopsticks clattered to the table as Hinata held a finger over the hole in her cheek and took another long drink of tea with a serene expression. I'm sorry, she mumbled, standing quickly and rushing from the scene. Hinata watched her go, then ate her rice happily as she smiled after her departing sister. They know me as either Naruto or that damned brat, Naruto explained candidly. And they don't like that damned brat very much. So, remember, I'm Naruto, she said, making her voice cute and breathy to go with her gorgeous young female body, and he's Naruto. She waved a hand negligently at the male clone walking beside them, who looked exactly as Naruto usually looked, with the black and orange jacket over black pants. Naruto was currently wearing a long, Chinese-style dress of some rose-colored fabric, which he'd slipped on over his shirt and shorts after he'd performed the jutsu. Sasuke glanced at his teammate, both of them, even if it was only one, dubiously. Naruto shrugged, and the movement did interesting things to her anatomy. Wouldn't be my first choice of how to go about it, but we use what we have. HN. Naruto, privately, got a kick out of every time he got the stoic Uchiha to respond, especially his short, wordless sounds so brief they couldn't even be called grunts. There we go, Naruto said cheerfully as they approached a clean, well-lit supermarket. Inside, an elderly woman swept the aisles, and a man of roughly the same age moved boxes behind a counter. Good morning, everyone. Naruto called cheerfully as she walked in, followed by Sasuke and the clone. Oh, hello, Naruto-chan. The woman replied, straightening. Sasuke wondered at the split-second glare she directed in his direction, no, at Naruto's clone behind him. It hadn't been friendly. I'm here to help you with that lot you want cleared, and I brought some assistance like I said I would, Naruto continued as if she hadn't seen the dirty look. This is Sasuke Uchiha, and this is... She paused and tapped her lips cutely. Well, I suppose Uzumaki-kun needs no introduction here. You're Dea, quite right, Naruto-chan, the older man growled as he walked over beside his wife. Naruto gave him her cutest, most innocent smile. Oh, don't be an old grump, Ida-san. I promise Uzumaki-kun will be on his best behavior. In fact, I think there's something he'd like to say to you both. She paused and cleared her throat, then clasped her hands and smiled at her male self. The clone stepped forward and bowed low. Ida-san, I apologize for putting saltpeter in your rice bins. It was a juvenile prank and I'm sorry. Sorry. But now that I'm a Konoha shinobi, I will not be pranking anymore, and I will do my utmost as a ninja to protect this village and all its inhabitants. Both of their attention was on the clone, but Sasuke watched the real Naruto. There was an glint to her eye that belied her cute, smiling appearance, hinting at something seething below the surface. Sasuke rather thought he wasn't sorry at all. "There, you see?" Naruto said smoothly, stepping forward to intercept their glares, which quickly softened as their attention turned to the friendly young blonde. "He's sorry, and he'll make it up to you by helping us clean up the lot. I'm sure he's not a bad boy, just a bit mischievous. Every town has at least one." She cocked her head sideways and smiled. Sasuke wanted to retch. Naruto was a dangerous ninja, not as dangerous as him, perhaps, but formidable just the same, and no one with that kind of skill should pander like that. "I'll forgive him if you insist, sweetie," the woman said grudgingly. "But be careful that your forgiving heart doesn't get you in trouble. Some people are just born bad, and they can use honeyed words to fool you." Naruto bowed. "Thank you, Ida-san. I will remember that." "Well, okay, but he better not slack off and make you do all the work," Ida said gruffly, his hand on his wife's shoulder. The clone took his cue and pushed around Naruto. "Hey, I'd never do that to Naruto-nichan." "Just you watch, I'll do more than my share of the work." "We'll see," he growled. The lot wasn't very far away from the grocery store, and something had once stood there, but had long since been torn down and hauled away. True to Naruto's word, the lot was covered in patches of wiry, prickly bushes and long grass, and even a few small trees. Beneath the vegetation lurked innumerable bricks and stones which would also have to be removed to make the lot suitable for building on again. Naruto and Sasuke walked in silence, while Naruto kept up a cheerful, meaningless conversation with Ida, demonstrating a detailed memory of their grandchildren, as well as his backaches and the Ida matriarch's bursitis. Despite the wrongness of his teammate turning himself into a simpering female, Sasuke had to respect the effort and skill shown. If they ever went on a mission that needed someone to go in undercover, he was sending Naruto. "Okay, we're here," Ida said, remarkably cheerful from his conversation with Naruto, as he sat down a bag of mixed box drinks his wife had sent as refreshments for the trio. "When my son died in the Yi 12 years ago, I didn't have the heart to try and rebuild here, but now the grandkids are growing up and needing a place to work, so it's time to break new ground," he said, scratching his chin thoughtfully, then brightened. "Old Miura let me keep some tools in his building over there, so I'll go get some axes." "Oh, I'm sure we won't need them, right, Sasuke-kun?" Naruto said brightly. "Why don't you show Ida-san what you can do?" Giving her a dark look, he walked to the edge of the lot, considering it thoughtfully. Then, before he allowed himself to grow irritated with the whole mess, he raced through a set of seals and leapt into the air. Katan, Gokakyu no Jutsu. A stream of fire burst from his lips, hitting the ground and curling back around itself, forming a gigantic ball of fire that almost touched the boundary markers for the lot itself. Grass, bushes, and trash alike was incinerated in the blast, leaving nothing but a fine black soot. "Wow!" Ida said appreciatively. "You are strong, young man, but I guess that's to be expected of a member of the famous Uchiha clan." He nudged Naruto, who bent willingly with his touch and took a step away, as if unbalanced. "You've got yourself a fine boyfriend there, Naruto-chan," he said, grinning. Sasuke's head whipped around in shock. "I hope he treats you to a nice night on the down in addition to Aishitoba's for your date," he continued. "Oh, don't tease me, Ida-san," Naruto replied playfully. "Sasuke-kun is a bit too young for me, after all. Besides, I already have someone." "Oh?" The old man replied, clearly intrigued. "What's the name of the buck who's captured our dear Naruto-chan's heart?" Sasuke watched as Naruto giggled, and put her hand on the older man's chest. "Ah, Ida-san, a lady does not kiss and tell." She winked. "Besides, it wouldn't be appropriate, at this stage in our relationship." Before he could reply, she turned to the others. "Uzumaki-kun? Could you tell me if the stones are cool enough to pick up now?" For a moment, he wondered why Naruto kept referring to his male self with the more formal last name, then decided it didn't really matter, and put it out of his mind. The clone, for his part, picked up a scorched stone thoughtfully, then nodded. Sure, Naruto-nichan. They're warm, but not hot. He smirked at Sasuke. Now it's my turn. Kagebushin no Jutsu. How? It was a clone, damn it. Naruto might be able to create hundreds of clones, but a single clone shouldn't be able to do it. Admittedly, the clone barely produced 24 copies of itself, but it still spoke of a hidden power. When they'd done their brief tree walking exercise the third day, they'd spent with Kakashi-sensei, he'd told them all that Naruto made up for his lack of a powerful bloodline like the other two by having more chakra than all of them combined, even including Kakashi himself. It didn't make him a better fighter, but it did mean he didn't get tired like the others. A useful trait in a teammate, Sasuke would admit. The small army of clones spread across the lot and immediately began picking up stones and bricks, under the doubtful eye of Old Man Ida. See? Naruto said brightly. I told you he was useful, and wanted to make amends. Now if you'll excuse me. She took over a section of the lot close to them, and also began picking through the rocks. Sasuke felt the old man's eyes come to rest on him for all of about a second before he HN'd and stalked forward to pick up rocks with Naruto. What an annoyance, he'd just been brought in to use a fire jutsu, not scratch through the dirt and get sooty. At one point, he could swear he caught a glimpse, some shred of intent, like someone was watching from a nearby building. But despite covert glances around, he couldn't spot anyone. It was probably just a Konoha ninja checking to see who was using a flashy technique like the Grand Fireball. Whole or usable half-bricks went in a pile in one corner, everything else went to a steady stream of clones making runs to the edge of town to scatter the rocks where they wouldn't get in anyone's way. Wow, good job, Naruto-chan, Ida said appreciatively about 15 minutes later, when most of the work was done and only a few clones remained scratching around for the smaller rocks. I have to admit, I wasn't sure if I should let you have the job, but you did a better job than I could have expected if I'd paid for a shinobi team. Naruto giggled, and, much to Sasuke's surprise, blushed on cue. Oh, I wouldn't say that. I just wanted to help out. Sasuke had stopped, and was waiting patiently for their little exchange to finish, but while he did so, he noticed something. One of Naruto's clones had a sour expression on his face, like he was tasting something foul. Ordinarily, Naruto guarded his expressions like precious treasure, and Sasuke knew that everything he said and everything he did was an act, no matter how smooth or perfectly delivered it was. Sasuke was no fool, he saw Naruto for the accomplished liar he was. But that clone, the one raking dirt into a large hole left behind by a section of wall, had an open, unguarded expression that spoke of barely restrained hostility. Deep inside his heart, Naruto must really not like the guy. Interesting. Sasuke would remember that little flaw in the Kagebushin. He smiled benevolently at her. Well, you certainly did. And here is your reward. He pulled out 2 slips of paper, meal tickets to Aishitoba, and handed them to her. Thank you. She replied brightly. I'll just give these to the boys and dash. Wait, you're going to give yours to the Uzumaki brat? He spluttered, interrupting her. She put on a confused expression. Well, of course. He did do a lot of the work. I didn't do anything at all. But... He began, then sighed and nodded. You're right, Naruto-chan. You're absolutely right. His expression firmed. But don't you think you didn't do anything, you were a big help to me. In fact, here. I've actually got another one, but I want you to have it. He waved a finger at her as he pulled another ticket out. And no giving it away, okay? Thank you, Ida-san. She gushed. I don't deserve it, dash. You do, now take it, with our blessing, he said, closing her hand around the ticket. Naruto-nichan. The clones called. We're done. And all but one popped out of existence. And just in time, too. She called back at herself, before turning back to her employer. Well, Ida-san, thank you very much for letting me help. she glanced at Sasuke. Knowing his cue, and resenting it anyway, Sasuke sketched a short bow and murmured thanks.
Yeah, thanks, old man. Glad I could help you and Naruto-nichan. No hard feelings, alright?
He bowed and thanked them in return, and if his movements were a little stiff and his smile a bit tight, no one called him on it. Naruto waved one last time as they walked away, together. You split yourself in two, so he'd pay you twice as much, Sasuke said without preamble.
Naruto grinned at him and tapped the side of her head.
Sasuke shook his.
Always thinking, Naruto.
She giggled and cocked her head sideways, for all the world to see as a cute, airhead young blonde.
Beware the stupid act. It is, after all, just an act. HN. He glanced at her. You really hate those people. It wasn't a question.
Naruto didn't trip, didn't make any sort of outward indication of surprise, but there was something, a hesitation, a tension, that spoke volumes to Sasuke. His first impulse was to deny it, but Sasuke wasn't the type to just fish for information without being pretty sure of himself. So, he'd respect his teammate's deduction skills. A more genuine, but cruel, smile twisted her sensuous lips. Yeah, I wanted one for Hinata-chan, but I really just wanted to screw the old man out of more money.
Aishitoba's is gonna taste sweet. They walked along in silence for a moment as Naruto handed payment over to his teammate.
Saltpeter?
Sasuke wondered what would make Naruto go so far as to steal another man's sexual potency. Naruto grinned.
Every day for almost a year and a half, before he got wise and hired someone to catch me. His wife thought he was just old and impotent.
Sasuke shook his head.
But a tiny smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Tiger penis and rhinoceros horn soup doesn't do a whole lot of good when it's loaded with saltpeter, but it still costs the same. It was sort of tame, for revenge. Nothing at all like what Sasuke would perform when he got the chance.
But there was still a certain artistry to it he could admire, and from various comments and rumors about what had really happened to Mizuki-sensei, Sasuke suspected Naruto was capable of more.
Sasuke Kun? With a start, he glanced around, shaken out of his musing.
Oh, hell!
Two young girls sprinted towards him from several blocks away, one leggy blonde, one shorter, with pink hair. Sakura and Ino, the only other two girls in the academy who were good enough to make genin, despite spending most of their time and energy annoying him.
Sasuke-kun. Who is that?
Harlot? They were getting closer. With another start, he glanced at Naruto, smiling beside him. He'd actually forgotten that he was currently in the shape of a girl. A girl walking with Sasuke. Ah, hell. This wasn't going to be good. There were so many potential misunderstandings. Don't! He hissed, glaring at the blonde.
What?
Naruto protested, giving him a look of surprised innocence. Whatever you're thinking, just don't. You're no fun, Sasuke-kun, Naruto complained, giving him doe eyes. But as the girls drew near, she added, want me to get rid of them? I got it.
Sasuke.
Who is this girl?
Don't tell me she's.
Sakura cried.
Sasuke, say it ain't so.
Ino added a second later. Naruto stepped forward, throwing out her voluptuous breasts aggressively. That's right, girls.
Wah!
They cried together. Yes. She added, striking a pose. Everything you fear has come true. You've wasted your opportunity, girls, and while you sat on your hands, I snapped him up. Sasuke gave him a look that simultaneously spoke of betrayal, fear, horror, and murder.
And oh.
Tears streamed down their faces. Oh yes. And you better not lay a hand on him, or I'll kick your asses.
Sasuke. Sakura whined.
How could you let this happen?
Sasuke had no choice in the matter. Naruto proclaimed.
Naruto was no match for my feminine wiles.
Maybe we can still have a threesome, I'm willing. Wait, what?
Sakura spluttered.
Yes, that's right. Naruto's mine. All mine.
She claimed, grabbing her clone by the arm and jerking him close.
You can't have him, so there.
She stuck out her tongue.
So, you're not dating this?
Ino began, the tears gone instantly and hope renewed filling her eyes.
Take me away, Naruto-sama.
Naruto cried, jumping into his arms and flinging her head back with wild abandon.
Take me back to your love shack and ravish me. Okay, he agreed.
He slung her over his shoulder, displaying her pert rump to the stunned trio, gave it a little slap, gave them a wink, and jumped away. Naruto sat cross-legged, upside down, hanging above the bridge Team 7 met their sensei at.
His expression was the very picture of serenity. Truly, he had achieved nirvana. A rock bounced off the back of his head.
He disappeared with a puff of smoke.
Didn't think so. Sasuke walked onto the bridge and leaned against the rail, opposite from where Hinata sat. You're not mad, are you, Sasuke-kun? Naruto asked, landing lightly beside Hinata.
Another thrown rock, and this one, too, was dispelled. In my defense, I didn't do what you know I was thinking about, and you know it, yet another. Naruto continued, walking up the bridge from the other side of the river.
Che. He looked away. You're smiling, Sasuke-kun. Did something happen? Hinata asked softly.
Well, I'm glad to see you're all lively this morning. They looked up to see Kakashi crouching on one of the bridge supports, smiling at them. That's a good thing, too, he continued, because we have a mission.
C rank. It should last about a week, including travel time.
Sasuke glanced at him, startled, and missed Naruto's comparable look of shock. He darted his eyes back and the blonde, who gave him an enigmatic smile and tapped his head.
Grudgingly, Sasuke nodded. Well played, Naruto, well played. Naruto repressed the urge to fidget. AC rank.
He'd been trying to corner all the D rank missions since the third day since they were an official team.
Finally, it worked.
And it made him look good in front of Sasuke.
Hot damn. Kakashi-sensei, what is the mission? He asked calmly, before Sasuke could beat him to it.
A village near our border with Rain has been having some sort of trouble with wild animals attacking their cattle.
Our mission is to guard, track, and eliminate the animals responsible.
He smiled benevolently. Think of it as an assassination mission, much like you would receive as a jonin, only our target is an animal of some kind. It was so cute, the way their eyes gleamed at the thought of killing something.
The village is Tamahijiro, a small and not very prosperous village on the edge of a swamp.
Naruto, you should get poisons and some medical supplies. Hinata, you get maps and hunting gear, and Sasuke, you get a selection of traps. All of you will need camping gear and food suitable for up to 2 weeks in the wild.
They nodded seriously.
The area is pretty wet, so we'll be doing some special training while we're there, similar to the tree walking exercise we did last week.
Water walking, sensei? Sasuke asked. That's right, it's another genin level skill. Unless Naruto already knows this one, too?
The sneaky little blonde read every scroll he could get his hands on, and already knew most genin level techniques. He'd even managed to mostly teach tree walking to Hinata before Kakashi had gotten around to bringing it up.
Naruto shook his head. No, sensei. I've read of it, but I've never tried.
There are more trees than water around here, after all. Good, Kakashi said happily.
We'll all learn something, now won't that be fun?
He paused, and his voice deepened, his demeanor becoming more serious.
Oh, and one more thing. You might want to prepare yourselves. Some of you might not come back alive, or at the very least, you will see horrible things. The animals that have been attacking the cattle, no one knows what they are. But they say that the cattle have been torn apart with a savagery unseen in man or beast. He seemed to loom over them, his words heavy as he invoked images of horrible, bloody violence. His students just looked back at him evenly. Abruptly, he was back to smiles. Ma, that's what they say, anyway. You have until noon to get ready. Meet me at the gate of Konoha, and don't forget anything. They all nodded solemnly and jumped away, hurrying to their assigned tasks. Kakashi shook his head and sighed. Why did they give me all the homicidal ones? If I didn't know better, I'd say there wasn't a spark of humor in the whole group. He paused. That, or my jokes aren't funny. He paused, considering. Nah. Chapter 5, Clients Lie, 2. Sensei, this is it? Naruto asked, looking at the shallow stream dubiously. The sun was dipping low in the sky, and they'd been running at top speed, a mad waste of chakra, but Kakashi, presumably, had his reasons. It is, Kakashi replied mildly. We'll be spending the night here, so why don't you go ahead and set up camp, first? I'll observe. Picking a nearby tree, he leapt into its branches. They were still deep in the fire country, and the area was heavily wooded with massive trees. The little stream didn't so much wind between them as trickle over their roots, forming shallow, but steep banks and the occasional deeper pool. Naruto's first response was to make a dozen clones and send them to scouting the area, while he began digging a small, concealable fire pit. Hey, Sasuke, can you handle the tents? Make your own tent, Naruto, Sasuke spat back, quickly assembling his own. I'm going to dig a latrine, so unless you want to switch. He warned. Sasuke grunted. Hinata, for her part, activated her Byakugan and began wandering around the camp slowly, ostensibly looking at the ground, but really her attention was elsewhere. Kakashi-sensei in the tree. No traps. No dangerous plants or animals. No sign of human contact anywhere, not a footprint, oddly bent stem, or scuff mark anywhere. Small fish, char, in the streams. Some plants lining the banks, not very close to the water, and dotted between the trees' roots. I don't think anyone has been here in a long time, she said quietly, glancing up at Naruto, who was jamming rocks together in a circle around his pit. There aren't any signs. That's not quite true, Kakashi offered from his perch. If you look in the trees, there are a couple of branches with footprints on them. Someone came through earlier today. Hinata blushed. Ayano, that was Naruto-kun. Are you sure? Kakashi asked, raising one eyebrow. She nodded. I recognize Naruto's tracks. He smiled. Very good, Hinata. Naruto has a tendency to crouch and touch his hands when he lands, it's very distinctive, and a good thing to know about your teammate. She flushed. I'm not very good, Kakashi-sensei. I can't immediately identify yours or Sasuke-kun's tracks. He smiled at her. All you need is practice. You've got a tremendous advantage, after all. No kidding, Naruto snorted as he picked up the small folding shovel he'd used to dig the fire pit and walked behind a big local tree to dig a latrine. Makes me look sort of plain, surrounded by all these powerful bloodlines, he said jovially. Naruto. Hinata gasped. You can't mean that. He shrugged and winked at her. It's okay. I may not have the eyes like you three, but I have my own tricks. She nodded. Kakashi watched curiously, wondering if he'd told Hinata the secret of the 9 tails. Hey, see if you can find something edible, okay, Hinata? He added. Okay, Naruto, she said obediently, activating her Byakugan and moving purposely away from the camp.
You give a lot of orders, Naruto-kun, Kakashi said wryly. He grunted as he began digging.
It only makes sense, sensei. Hinata knows plants and fungi. That's interesting. Naruto nodded. Yeah. And she's really good at finding them, too.
Sasuke or I might stumble across them, but I only know the basics, and Sasuke hasn't admitted to any detailed horticultural studies. So, it makes sense for Hinata to do it. Kakashi watched them all with interest. Naruto had some sort of relationship with Hinata, which, honestly, he wasn't sure was appropriate. But Hinata wasn't complaining. Indeed, he'd even asked her a few questions about the blonde once. She described him in only the most complimentary terms, and if Kakashi was any judge of people, which he was, he figured she honestly believed he only had her best interests at heart. Naruto, however, was far too wily a conversational opponent to get information from he didn't want you to have. Kakashi eyed him warily, aware that he sometimes seems to take more vicious options by choice. But, of all the three genin, he thought the most, learning quickly and looking underneath, and creating quite a few layers to hide behind as well. In any ordinary group, he'd be the uncontested leader, if not for Sasuke. Sasuke, at least, was someone Kakashi could relate to. Solitary, quiet, and an utter genius at learning new techniques. He also didn't take orders well. He listened to Kakashi with a quiet acceptance, willing to learn, silently disdainful of orders he could have figured out himself. Naruto's orders, however much the blonde couched them as suggestions, were seen with both hostility and caution. Sometimes he'd take a different path just out of spite, but Naruto was getting especially clever at making sure that not only were his ideas the best ones, they were also the only workable ones. Wearing him down through patience. Interesting. Either Naruto honestly did not think he could win in a fight versus Sasuke, or in a surprisingly sophisticated turn he was using diplomacy rather than brute force. Time would tell. Not a bad camp, he said finally. But I do have to ask a question. Why are there only 3 tents? That was all we brought, Sasuke replied plainly. 'Cause we didn't want to share one big one? Naruto replied sardonically. Ah no. Hinata blushed. He raised an eyebrow. Well, that one's yours, Naruto said pointing. The one on the other side is the one Sasuke brought, and the one in the middle is Hinata's. And you? He shrugged, a small smile on his lips. No point in carrying a tent if I don't need one, right? I packed extra gear, and didn't bring a tent. His eyes flicked to Hinata. She was blushing furiously, and tapping her fingers together, but she looked up, directly at Kakashi. I asked Naruto-kun to sleep with me, Kakashi-sensei. Sasuke twitched slightly at her word choice, and even Kakashi had to still an involuntary response. He wondered if she'd deliberately chosen those words without Naruto's help. He was obviously a tremendous influence. Oh. He replied mildly. And I suppose your father is okay with these sleeping arrangements? Expecting some sort of guilty reaction, he was much surprised when her blush faded and she gave him a look loaded with killer intent. My father is my problem, she said, deadly quiet. And what he doesn't know, she paused, won't hurt me. As a fully fledged Konoha shinobi, my sleeping arrangements are my business. She gave him what could only be described as a look, capitalized. Right, Kakashi-sensei? He shrugged, impressed by her ferocity. To a certain extent, I suppose you could say that. However, that does not mean there won't be consequences. She nodded firmly. I'm counting on it. Well, with that kind of attitude, what can I say about it? He mused. Let's train. He hopped down, a jump of nearly 30 feet, and landed lightly on his feet. Now, I'm sure you're aware that higher-level shinobi can walk on the surface of water with their chakra. He took a number of steps onto the surface of the stream, standing easily on the very surface. The stream was slow-moving, but it was still noticeable how it slowly carried him away. They walked alongside, keeping pace. Hinata activated her Byakugan to watch closely. Sasuke just stared at Kakashi's feet. Naruto had a look of concentration on his face. Kakashi walked a few paces back and forth. The technique involves a continuous flow of chakra. Similar to tree walking, you have to mold chakra in your feet, or wherever you touch the water, but unlike tree walking, you have to release the chakra into the water in a steady stream, or you'll sink. He smiled at them as he slowed, the stream forming a large, nearly still pool. Now you try. None of them moved. But Kakashi was glad to note they each had an expression that spoke of thought. Sasuke looked serious. Hinata had her eyes wide. Naruto looked like he was about to murder someone. Sasuke was the first to step onto the water's surface. And through it, his foot hitting gravel. He pulled it out with a grimace of distaste and hesitated. Go for it, Hinata, if you're ready, Naruto said quietly, not looking at her. You can do it. Nodding, she took several wobbly steps, sinking slowly deeper into the water with each one. Her face screwed up in concentration, but it was no good, she was standing on the bottom of the pool. She climbed out slowly, then turned and stared intently at Kakashi's feet. He smiled encouragingly, then turned to look at Sasuke, who was trying again. The water was obviously firmer under his feet, but not enough, and once again he sank with a splash 2 steps in. Naruto formed a seal with his hands, then stepped forward. All eyes were on him. 1 step. The water seemed solid. 2 steps, and he wobbled badly, nearly losing his balance. His other foot came forward again, and at first it sank, then it rose, then it sank, he grunted in exertion, and fell over with a loud splash. Sasuke's chuckles weren't very loud, but they stood out. Hinata glared at him. Kakashi smiled silently. Naruto climbed to his feet with an air of wounded dignity, doffed his jacket, leaving himself in a white t-shirt, and tossed it onto the bank. I should have done that before, he admitted, turning to the others. You might want to do the same. No point getting your clothes wet. Hinata nodded and started taking off her jacket. Sasuke stared, obviously so. Naruto's eye twinkled. Actually, I was talking to Sasuke-kun. He formed a seal, and suddenly, it was Naruto standing there, her voluptuous breasts heaving under her thin, wet, white cotton shirt. I'm sure both us girls would love to see Sasuke's manly chest. She cooed. Humph. He said, looking away. Kakashi sighed in embarrassment for his students. Naruto gave Hinata a sultry smile, then dispelled the jutsu and became a boy again. Sasuke, to cover his embarrassment, strode boldly onto the surface of the water, making it 4, then 5 steps before sinking up to his knees. He glanced at the other 2 in triumph. Hinata looked down, as if in shyness, but she also formed the same seal Naruto had used. Hesitantly, she stepped out onto the water. It held firm. Then, she took another. And another. Soon she was in the middle of the pool, near Kakashi. Woohoo, Hinata-chan. Nice. Naruto called. Ma. Very good, Hinata. Your control is very good for a genin, Kakashi said in praise. She blushed. I can see how much you're using, and I try to use the same amount. Kakashi looked up to see Sasuke, ankle deep in water, glowering. Ah, Sasuke, when you develop your Sharingan, you'll be able to see chakra as well, he offered, mollifying the boy. Really, sensei? Naruto asked. The Sharingan lets you see chakra like the Byakugan? Kakashi nodded. Can you see through stuff, too? Kakashi shook his head. No, the Sharingan is related to the Byakugan, some say it is an offshoot, but many of the abilities are different. I don't know all the details of the Byakugan, I'm sure Hinata-chan would tell you more than I know, but the Sharingan excels at copying jutsu, as well as creating and dispelling genjutsu.
Really? So, which one is more powerful? Naruto pressed, walking 2 steps into the water before he sank once more.
The Sharingan, Sasuke said quietly. They all glanced at him, except for Kakashi, who looked at Hinata instead. The Hyuga were usually just as proud of their eyes as the Uchiha.
Really? Then how come you're still on the bank, and Hinata is out there with Kakashi? Naruto didn't sound like he was mocking the black-haired boy. Sasuke's hands tightened into fists.
I haven't developed my Sharingan very far, yet.
But I will.
He walked into the water, momentarily so distracted he didn't even mold chakra.
Naruto made a splash of his own. So why haven't you? He asked, honestly curious. If you want it so bad.
Sasuke's head jerked. The Sharingan usually evolves in combat, according to my family's scrolls.
I can see that, Naruto admitted.
The path to strength seems to often start over the bloody corpses of your enemies.
Ma! Kakashi interrupted. That's a violent view of things, Naruto.
Abruptly, his face was all smiles. Oh, don't worry, Kakashi-sensei.
I only said seems. I know that the path to true strength begins with friends and ends.
They all looked at him expectantly, Sasuke disdainfully, Hinata hanging on his every word.
With lots of friends. He enthused. Splash.
They all jerked their heads around to see Hinata flailing beneath the surface.
Kakashi chuckled. Even Sasuke had a smile tugging at his lips.
Her head burst out of the water as she got her feet beneath her, the shallow pool only coming to about chest deep.
She coughed and spluttered.
Well, you got the idea down, but you still need to master it.
Can you climb onto the surface from there? Hinata nodded, wiping water from her eyes.
Yes, Kakashi-sensei. That was easier said than done, however.
Summoning his chakra, Sasuke concentrated, then took 2 small steps.
Rather than taking more, he paused, making sure his footing was good. Naruto, too, tried again, making it 5 steps into the pool. The overbalanced and fell in with another splash. He sat up calmly, crossed his legs, formed a seal, and began concentrating.
Hinata slipped back into the water, having gotten both arms and 1 knee out. Sasuke sank again.
With a grunt and a nearly palpable wave of chakra, Naruto popped to the top of the pool like a cork, actually flying several inches into the air, before landing slightly sideways and falling over again. Hinata, carefully, climbed back onto the water's surface and shakily regained her feet.
Nice, Hinata. He called. Now, can you tell me what I've been doing wrong?
You're using too much chakra, she replied immediately, then her jaw closed with an audible click and she looked aghast.
Not that. I mean. She spluttered.
Cool, thanks, he replied, ignoring the rest of her stuttering.
He regained his seated position and started concentrating again. Sasuke grits his teeth, standing up to his knees in water. Finally, he spat, fine. What am I doing wrong?
She blinked, turning to watch him.
Could you try again? He nodded, irritated.
Again, 3 steps in, he started to sink, and by the 4th, he had lost it.
Well?
He asked, looking at her expectantly. You're using too little chakra, only a little more than you use climbing trees, she explained. You have to use about twice as much to begin with, then make more of it flow.
Naruto opened one eye, dropping his hands into the water by his side. That's useful information.
I wonder why our sensei didn't tell us that.
Kakashi chuckled benevolently. And miss the fun of watching you figure it out on your own? Fun, huh? Naruto asked. That's what you call determining how fast we learn by trial and error?
Kakashi grinned at him.
Yep. Naruto frowned.
Well, at least some of us learn faster by watching. He motioned at Hinata, then Sasuke. Everyone turned to see Sasuke take another slow, deliberate step onto the water. He was about a third of the way to the middle, and his footing seemed stable. Yeah, that's Sasuke for you. Learns everything damned near immediately, Naruto said quietly, but there was actually a note of deliberate pride in his voice. Way to go, Sasuke. Sasuke sniffed. Very good, Sasuke. Most people take 2 or 3 days to get that far, Kakashi noted. Huh, Naruto mused thoughtfully, his body completely motionless. So this is what it's like to be surrounded by geniuses of powerful clans. It's hard to compete. Kakashi looked at him thoughtfully. Ah, well, he said after a moment, with a small, rueful grin. I'll get it soon. Until then, I'll have to console myself with the fact that my talents lie elsewhere. He lifted both hands, displaying a dripping kunai in each. 3 fish dangled from the left, and 2 were impaled, dead, not even twitching, on the right. Sasuke ducked, blocked Hinata's 2-fingered strike with a sweep of his forearm, flipped backwards and used the distance to leap over her head, landing with a small splash as his chakra-charged feet disrupted the surface of the water for a second on landing. He threw an elbow backwards, aiming for the center of her back. She twisted effortlessly, and he hissed in displeasure as her hand brushed his side beneath his arm. That's a cripple, Kakashi called. Sasuke, you can't use your left arm, now. Obediently, he let the arm hang limp as he flew backwards to the very edge of the pool, the boundary of their sparring session. Unfortunately for him, the small confines of the water were a tremendous advantage to Hinata, who specialized in extremely fast, close combat. They were sparring gently, to leave each other in shape for the mission, which meant that he couldn't use his devastating wide-area fire jutsu, either. He was starting to reconsider his self-imposed restriction on kunai. Hey, sensei, I think I've got it, Naruto said, appearing at Kakashi's side. The white-haired Jounin glanced at him, unsurprised. Naruto had been quiet, but far from quiet enough to fool him. I see you've gotten better at controlling your splashes, he noted. Naruto had the grace to look embarrassed. Yeah, well, I know I can't use as much chakra as I want all the time, but it's still tricky to rein it in. He paused, watching as Sasuke kicked and punched, putting Hinata on the defensive. Easier than when I learned tree walking, though. Took me a week to get that down. The unforeseen curse of a large chakra capacity, Kakashi noted. And only adequate control. Naruto looked at him. Hey, I thought you said I had good control? I mean, I know I'm not as deft as Hinata, or even Sasuke, really, but I'm not that bad. That was before I actually watched you learning something new. You gain skill quickly, it seems, but you start off rather slow. Hinata parried and blocked her opponent's attacks, exceeding his speed with her hands as she even deflected his kicks and sweeps. Not once had she lost her balance since the match had started, but she was hard-pressed to penetrate Sasuke's defenses when he used all his limbs to defend and attack, and she only used her hands. She lunged, taking him by surprise for a moment, letting her deceptively gentle touches be brushed aside as she spun slightly, aiming an elbow for his heart. His good hand was on her jacket, and she was lifted bodily as he heaved, her elbow striking harmlessly to the side of his head, and then she was flying. Sasuke was waiting for her where she was going to hit the water again, his body stiff, his leg cocked for a devastating kick that would power through her defenses. Hinata's eyes were wide. She could see the tenketsu on his leg as clear as day, even in the fading light of the evening. His kick would hurt, but she'd disable his leg, and soon the match would be hers. She grew closer, readying herself to strike. And then his right arm made a wide sweeping motion, pulling a wire she hadn't noticed, and suddenly her feet were flying out from under her, leaving her to hit the water flat on her back. His leg flashed out, a fraction of an inch from her throat, and she gasped, getting a breath of water as her concentration failed and she sank beneath the surface. And, that's a kill, Kakashi said happily. Very good use of ninja tools against an opponent who can see the finest wire, Sasuke.
He glanced back at Naruto. Yeah. You can't always use brute force. I got that. Kakashi smiled. Such a bright student. Too bad he was so bloodthirsty. He glanced at the sky. Well, we seem to have burned the usable daylight. We'll have to see how you do in the morning before we leave, Naruto. Naruto grimaced. Yeah. I took too damned long. Sorry, Kakashi-sensei. He shrugged. You'll just have to get faster. Now, I believe I smell roasting fish? Stuffed with pepper-seasoned rice, Naruto agreed. Cooking was, of course, another skill you could learn from a book. The meal was well received with compliments from Kakashi and Hinata, and a HN from Sasuke, who otherwise ate without complaint. I have a little test for you tonight, Kakashi began once the meal was through. This will determine your most likely training path for the future. What kind of test, sensei? Hinata asked. A test to determine your chakra affinity, he explained. I trust they explained elemental chakra types to you in school? They all nodded. Well, I've brought several sheets of chakra paper, made from special trees influenced by chakra over a long period of time. He rummaged around in his pouch, then held up a sheet of dirty tan paper for his students to see. After a few seconds, it crinkled into a wad. When it crinkles like this, that means I have a lightning affinity, he explained, rummaging around in his pouch with his free hand, then handing a second sheet of paper to Sasuke. It immediately crinkled, and Sasuke held it up with a raised eyebrow. So, I will be able to use lightning jutsu? He asked. Not just lightning jutsu, but you will be able to use them very well, Kakashi corrected. If it gets cut in two, that indicates a wind type. Water, it gets wet. Fire, it bursts into flame. Earth, it crumbles into dust. He held up 2 more folded sheets of paper with a smile, then handed them to Naruto and Hinata. Naruto looked at his sheet of paper dubiously. Kakashi-sensei? He hazarded. You gave me a page from a book. Kakashi replied. I don't think so. What does it say? Naruto began, tilting it to catch the firelight. But we mustn't, Minoru-kun, someone might see, Akira protested weakly, gasping as the boy's hand slid into her panties. He read, his voice rising perceptibly toward the end. They all stared at him. That's what it says, he protested. Look, he said, brandishing the page. Akira's too large uniform slipped off her shoulders and puddled at her feet, her cute and shy face looking to one side as she bared herself. It's what it says. Ah, Kakashi exclaimed. I understand. That's a page from Ika Blushing Maidens. For the chakra paper to turn into that. He paused. It means you have the elemental affinity of hentai. Naruto stared at him in complete disbelief. Kakashi shrugged theatrically. Well, you are planning on sharing a tent with Hinata. He turned to the young Kunoichi. You might want to take that as a warning, Hinata-chan. Most girls your age don't want to share a tent with a boy of such obvious tendencies. Sasuke snorted in quiet laughter. Hinata blushed. Kakashi didn't bother to keep the grin off his face. After a moment, Naruto snorted and threw the wadded-up paper back. Sensei, you idiot. Kakashi laughed and handed him another piece of paper, which he took cautiously, turning it over to look at both sides. He turned once again to the embarrassed girl. So, Hinata-chan, what do you have? Not more arrow, is it? She blushed madly, like the setting sun, and shook her head. No, sensei, it doesn't seem to be doing anything, she admitted hesitantly. He replied thoughtfully. It should react to the smallest amount of chakra. Try deliberately channeling chakra through it. She frowned at it,
but it resolutely refused to change. Naruto, meanwhile, muttered something about a perverted sensei and forced a large amount of chakra through the paper in his hand.
Immediately, he had two.
Ah, a wind element user, Kakashi noted approvingly. Wind is very powerful in combat, especially short to mid-range.
Good, he replied, pleased, then looked thoughtful. Though I kinda liked the hentai one.
Hinata held her other hand over the paper, frowning in concentration.
Nothing happened.
A small flare of light caught their attention.
The paper in Sasuke's hand had burst into flame.
Ah, very good, Sasuke.
Two elemental affinities, that will be a powerful advantage to you. I was surprised by the lightning, but flame is to be expected of an Uchiha.
Your clan has been known for powerful katan jutsu for generations. He glanced back at Hinata, who had pumped so much chakra into her hand it glowed to anyone sensitive to it.
And you, Hinata, you can stop now.
I've heard of this, but you're the first Hyuga I've trained, so I'd never seen it before.
Sensei? She asked, looking up.
He shrugged.
Ma, you might want to ask your father about it,
but it seems that your clan, with almost nothing but pure chakra jutsu, rarely develop elemental affinity.
Have you ever seen any clan techniques involving elemental type jutsu?
She shook her head. No, Sensei, only those related to the Byakugan and a few other techniques. He smiled gently at her.
Well, that's okay, then. It won't be a hindrance to you. It seems that your clan techniques really are what you're suited for. She nodded.
But he saw a dark look pass momentarily over her face.
Odd. Another flare of light caught everyone's eye.
The paper in Naruto's hand burned with a clean yellow light.
Kakashi's eyebrow raised. Another fire type?
Naruto grinned, then pulled a burning twig from behind his back. Something like that, he said with a smirk.
Kakashi nodded at his little joke.
Two students with two elements this early in their training was pretty unlikely, anyway.
Well, it's been a very informative day.
Sasuke has a lot of chakra for a genin, and very good control, he said, gesturing at the dark-haired boy, whose head moved imperceptibly, indicating he'd been beginning to nod off.
Naruto has an incredibly large chakra capacity, but his control is only fair.
He tries to make up for his lack of efficiency by simply using more chakra, which sometimes causes problems. He turned to Hinata, whose liquid white eyes glimmered at him in the firelight. And you, Hinata, have less chakra than the other two, but you use it with precision. You are clearly going to be a talented close-range fighter. He shifted his position slightly. Sasuke will perform well at any distance, so what he chooses will largely be up to him.
Naruto, though. He paused, then smiled. Well, we'll find out in the morning. Be thinking about it, Naruto, but no sneaky extra training tonight, okay?
You may have plenty of chakra left, but you'll need to be as prepared as possible when we reach Tamahijiro tomorrow night. Naruto nodded, and Hinata rose and began tidying up the campsite area.
Oh, and one more thing.
I don't have to tell you that resting tonight also means you need to sleep in that tent, not anything else, Kakashi warned.
Naruto's serious face blossomed into a grin. And deny my very elemental nature? Sensei, how cruel.
Kakashi frowned at him, then shrugged. Naruto and Hinata might not be taking the wisest course, but Naruto was both clever and cautious.
He'd just have to keep an eye out for immediate trouble.
Not that the current situation didn't scream trouble to his senses, anyway.
Sensei, what order do you want the watch? Sasuke asked.
Very good question, Sasuke, he replied happily. I hadn't planned on warning you, but since you ask, I'll be taking the first watch. I'll wake Naruto at midnight, he can relieve Dash.
Me, Sensei, Hinata said quietly.
Okay, Hinata, at 2, he agreed easily, and you can take it from 4 till dawn.
Any questions?
They shook their heads.
Sounds good, then. Sleep tight.
His voice wasn't quite mocking. Taking up a comfortable position on a branch overlooking the camp, Kakashi pulled out a worn copy of Ika Ika, then hesitated, watching Naruto and Hinata enter their tent, and the way Sasuke hesitated before entering his. His students worried him. Sasuke had a lust for revenge so strong it could well destroy him, and a distrust of his team that Kakashi couldn't entirely blame him for. Hinata was so dependent on Naruto she was almost hopeless, except that Naruto was so ruthless he pushed her to be stronger, faster, than was good for her.
Without Naruto, she'd crumble, and with Naruto, she might well break.
Naruto, for all his cleverness, had a mean streak a mile wide and a lust for power that would either make him one of the most feared shinobi in Konoha, or a missing nin. The biggest problem, he reflected, was that every single one of them was in such a hurry to grow up they had sacrificed their childhoods on the black altar of death. Sure, they were older than he'd been as a chunin, but he'd been different.
Well, no, maybe not all that different.
Perhaps that was why he'd been assigned to the trio. Nodding softly to himself, he made a silent promise that this time, he'd keep them safe, both from the dangers without, and the demons within. Then he cast a simple dojutsu that gave him powerful night vision, and flipped his damaged book open to his current page. It was a shame to hurt such a precious work of literature, but the book was worn and the bindings loose, and the look on Naruto's face had been more than worth it. The little trickster needed to be reminded that other people manipulated situations, too. Naruto crawled into the little tent, removing his jacket as he did so, intending to use it as a pillow. The fire had been banked, leaving them in the pitch blackness of the nighttime forest, so he pulled out a tiny flashlight, adjusted it for flood, and turned it on, blinking at the sudden glare. Hinata stared at him as she crawled in on her knees. Unlike him, she didn't blink or squint at the light, another quirk of her special eyes. He glanced at her, then resumed shimmying out of his shoes and pants, leaving him in nothing but a t-shirt and boxers. As he undressed, she unrolled a single sleeping bag, extra large, and unzipped it before sitting back and looking at him with an expressionless face. He ignored her as he rummaged through his jacket, checking his hidden weapons. Finally, she could stand it no longer, and, walking on her knees to his side, she put her arms around his waist, grabbing the hem of his shirt. She inhaled deeply, drawing in his scent, musky with the day's sweat and stream water. She kissed the back of his neck, like he did with her sometimes. He didn't react on the surface, but she could hear his heart speed up, just a little bit. Smiling, she gently lifted the hem of his shirt, pulling it slowly upward as he raised his arm and allowed her to take it off. Still, he refused to give her any attention as he continued his equipment check, even as she ran her hand over his lean back and chest, pausing when her fingertips hit the faint scar where Sasuke had accidentally stabbed him in a training session. Still, he didn't look at her. Pouting slightly, she backed off and started getting ready for bed herself. She didn't carry but 2 hidden kunai, 1 in each sleeve, and 3 senbon beside them. As a taijutsu user, she rarely used them anyway, and only carried a fraction of the number either of her teammates did. Her jacket was folded in a manner similar to Naruto's, and put carefully to one side. Unlike Naruto, she wore her customary layers of mesh armor, though today she was wearing a plain black sports bra. She hadn't expected the mission, nor her night's sleeping arrangement, and mentally cursed her lack of foresight. She decided to always wear something sexy from now on, just in case she got to show it to Naruto. The mesh shirt she removed as well, placing neatly over her jacket and her shoes beside them. Behind her, Naruto crawled into the sleeping bag, leaving it unzipped, one corner folded back across his waist. He propped his head up on one hand, looking at her. Now was the time. She carefully slid her pants down her legs, leaning forward to get them down her thighs, displaying her firm bottom, clad now only in boy-cut black panties. She rocked onto the side of one thigh to get them all the way off, acutely conscious of Naruto's eyes. She wanted to know what he thought. But if she asked, she'd be needy. Naruto didn't like needy. So, she didn't ask. Now wearing only her bra and panties, she hesitated, wondering if she should take them off. Wondering if Naruto would approve of her boldness, or put her in her place with a word. "Let's go to sleep, Hinata-chan," he said quietly, patting the sleeping bag with one hand before turning off the little flashlight and sticking it in his jacket. Feeling a wave of relief, she quickly slid across the narrow gap and against Naruto's side, curling against him with her face on his shoulder and her arm across his chest. Just like she'd wanted to do for ages. He was thin, but his muscles moved like whipcord under his skin. She snuggled into his chest with a sigh, barely repressing a wriggle of pleasure when his arm wrapped around her, his hand gripping her side, right above her hip. Oh, how she wanted him to grab lower. But he didn't, and she lay there for several long minutes as his breath slowed into a deep, regular rhythm. He was probably asleep. Her eyes flicked open with a start as she realized there was something she'd meant to tell him. "What is it, Hinata?" he asked, suddenly, nearly scaring her out of her wits. "Naruto." She stammered, blushing. How did you know I wanted to say something?" "I know you," he said simply, but vaguely. He felt no particular urge to let her know that the sudden brush of her eyelashes on his skin was the clue. She blushed in the darkness. "Well, I just wanted to say, Sasuke pulls his wire out left-handed." She held her breath, waiting for a response as he lay there silently. "Always?" he asked finally. She nodded fiercely. "Every time I've ever seen him do it. Left-handed." There was another pause. Then his arms squeezed around her. "That's my clever little vixen," he said quietly, and pulled her closer, her face automatically tilting up. His kiss was warm on her lips. His vixen. Hinata sighed happily and kissed his chest before she settled back down, his praise making her tingle. Naruto. Naruto's eyes snapped open, his mind automatically placing a name to the voice. Kakashi. It was nearly imperceptible, but the presence of someone outside his tent moved away. He nudged Hinata, who woke with a sudden tension in her body. "Naruto-sama?" she whispered sleepily as he slid over her, climbing out of the sleeping bag. "I'm about to take watch," he replied quietly. "Check the area while I get dressed." She immediately activated her Byakugan, and if she took a moment to watch him get dressed in the darkness, her scan of the camp and immediate area was no less thorough because of it. All clear. She let her technique lapse, yawning. He patted her leg, then slipped out of the tent into the blackness. For a moment, she thought about watching, but the sleeping bag was still warm from his presence. She fell back asleep. Naruto paused a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. It was still basically solid black, the moon wasn't up and the starlight was useless under the thick canopy. But Ninja was trained to move in the darkness, and he silently climbed a nearby tree he'd picked out while it was light, clinging lightly to the trunk with his chakra as he found a good spot to hide. Sleep was gone from his mind within moments as his senses strained for any hint of danger. He didn't expect a serious attack, but Kakashi might decide to spring surprise training on him. Naruto would not be caught napping. Really, though, he was glad of the time to himself. He needed to come up with a plan to fight Sasuke in the morning. Without his kunai and a surprise, disabling or lethal blow, Sasuke would be quite a challenge. Naruto had every confidence he could win, provided he could summon Kage Bushins, but Kakashi had made several comments since he'd started training them about Naruto's reliance on the move. So, just as a point of pride, Naruto wouldn't use the jutsu, whether Kakashi forbade it or not. He actually kind of hoped Kakashi wouldn't forbid it. It would be much more impressive to Sasuke if he kicked his ass without it being forbidden. Sasuke was a proud, prickly sort of ninja. Naruto hated that type, except that Sasuke backed up his arrogance every time. He wouldn't be using kunai, either. Actually, he rarely used kunai. If he used ninja weapons, it was usually wire and shuriken. He was devilishly creative with both, controlling up to half a dozen shuriken with thin wires.
Add his speed, skill with taijutsu, and fire jutsu, and he was a hell of an opponent.
At least his fire jutsu wouldn't be an issue, as a lethal or near-lethal move. They would probably also be forbidden in the sparring match. His speed, on the other hand, while not nearly as fast as Hinata, he also wasn't as one-dimensional in how he used it. Ordinarily, Naruto would set up traps beforehand, since he knew he'd be facing him, and where.
Lots of traps. But that wasn't the solution this time. It was beautiful, really. Sasuke was everything Naruto could want in a teammate. Calm. Collected. Popular with others. Breathtakingly skilled. Unspeakably powerful. Vulnerable.
His eyes straining into the darkness, Naruto happily whiled away the time, his mind examining the problem from every angle. Hinata woke 30 minutes later, moaning slightly as she flailed in the too large sleeping bag.
Naruto wasn't there.
That was because Naruto was on watch. Instead of sleeping with her. Frowning sleepily, she gathered up the sleeping bag around her and left in search of Naruto.
Sasuke woke at 10 minutes till 4 in the morning.
It wasn't a difficult ability, it just took a certain discipline in telling yourself when to wake up. He pulled his clothes on quickly, then left his tent to relieve Naruto at the watch, stretching briefly as he stood straight.
Sasuke.
The voice was Naruto's, coming from high to his left. Blinking owlishly, he found Naruto's tree and climbed it silently. Halfway up, he found an unusual sight. Naruto leaned back against the trunk, staring at him in the darkness.
In his arms, wrapped in a voluminous sleeping bag, was Hinata, nuzzled into his chest. He looked away.
She was supposed to be on watch, he noted expressionlessly.
True. Naruto didn't elaborate. Are you planning on taking my watch, too? No.
Just curious if you wanted me to leave Hinata for you, Naruto replied reasonably. Sasuke spat.
Are you sure? Naruto asked. She'll keep you warm. I will be perfectly fine.
They stared at each other for a moment.
Finally, Naruto shook his head.
You should pick one of your girls, Sasuke, he said finally.
Some of them would do anything for you. They're too obsessed with me, Sasuke shot back.
Besides, some of us can think with our minds, not our dicks.
Really?
Naruto shifted Hinata in his arms, letting the sleeping bag fall away, displaying pale flesh that seemed to glow in the darkness. She moaned sleepily as she was moved.
Sasuke carefully didn't look away, despite the heat in his face. In the darkness, it would be invisible. He hoped.
Enticing, isn't it? Naruto said quietly, looking down at the girl in his arms with an unreadable expression.
He didn't reply. The tension in his body was answer enough.
You're a hell of a fighter, Sasuke. Denying what you want can be as much of a weakness as enslaving yourself to it. He grinned, his white teeth flashing in the dark.
I know what you want, Sasuke. I can get it for you.
The sneer formed almost of its own volition. I want something far more important than the affection of some girl, he all but snarled.
Naruto's grin, if anything, grew wider. You want many things, Sasuke, just like I do. Revenge may be the one you hold on to, but don't underestimate the others.
Sasuke stared back, momentarily unsettled.
Ah, well. Time to finish my night's sleep, Naruto said suddenly.
He stood up carefully, keeping Hinata in his arms, and, with a jaunty wave to the dark-haired boy, stepped off the branch without a sound.
Chapter 6, Client's Lie, 3.
Good morning, Kakashi-sensei, Hinata said quietly as she emerged from the tent. Good morning, Hinata, Naruto, he replied, not looking up from his book.
Are you cooking? Naruto asked, right behind Hinata. Sasuke started some rice. Ah. Nice.
Naruto headed for the stream, Hinata beside him, and crouched by the bank, splashing water into his face. He spluttered for a moment, wiping his face with one hand, while the other casually dangled into the water. Hinata scrubbed lightly at her hands in the clear stream, picking carefully at her fingernails. Anyone with good eyes might have seen how the water around her hands seemed to gel and thicken. A bit of rotten leaf, floating on the water, swirled between their two hands, then stopped, as if it had ran aground. Naruto ran his hand through his hair and shifted position, his other hand moving slightly in the water. The leaf tugged his direction a fraction of an inch. Hinata smiled and nodded to an unseen question. And, as if its journey had never been interrupted, the bit of leaf resumed its trip. Breakfast was quick and quiet. Sasuke made enough rice for everyone, serving himself and retreating as an announcement it was done. Hinata served Naruto and Kakashi before taking a bowl for herself. It was plain, but filling. Kakashi waited until the gear had been packed before motioning to them and heading to the pool. Naruto grinned. Sasuke looked bored. Okay, I want this to be a casual spar, Kakashi began lightly. Don't kill each other. Don't wound each other. Stop when I tell you to stop. Remember that we're on a mission. Sasuke, no fire jutsu. Naruto, no Kagebushin. Naruto carefully kept the disappointment from his face. No kunai, senbon, or shuriken, Kakashi continued. The purpose of this spar isn't so you can settle your issues, to impress me, or to woo Hinata. Hinata and, surprisingly, Sasuke blushed a little at those words. Naruto just looked startled. So, whatever is running through your aggressive little minds, forget it. I want you to show me that you can fight on the water. He smiled. And, to make things more interesting, I think you'll do it blind. He pulled out two black bandanas, already folded into strips. Naruto opened his mouth, looked at Sasuke, then closed it with an audible snap. They let Kakashi tie the bandanas over their eyes silently, then turned and walked to opposite sides of the pool, Sasuke gliding over the surface of the water, Naruto raising little splashes with each step. Kakashi grinned in obvious delight at his student's antics. Sensei? Hinata asked. He rarely seemed so delighted, unless it was on the days he'd show up with a new book. Begin! He said loudly, then crouched down beside Hinata. Sasuke immediately started sliding across the water, smooth and silent, and Naruto froze in place. After a moment, she copied her teacher. Sensei? She asked again. He glanced at her, back to the boys, then back to her, and shrugged. Okay, here's a lesson for you. Tell me what they're thinking, and how it relates to their personal styles. I'll make sure they can't hear us. He began forming seals for a concealment jutsu. She blinked. That was unexpected. But, okay. She activated her Byakugan and peered at the other two. Her clan's bloodline gave her many of the same abilities to read and predict an opponent as the Sharingan did, just not the ability to copy them. After another moment, she began to narrate. Sasuke is skilled and confident. He immediately went on the hunt, trusting his ability to be silent as he waits for Naruto to make a mistake. He does not underestimate Naruto's abilities, and expects a many-layered trap, so he doesn't stay in one place very long, but he expects to spot the first opening and use it. Kakashi nodded, watching as Sasuke silently zigzagged back and forth across the pool. He also hopes to run into Naruto by chance, and rely on his superior taijutsu to win the battle. And Naruto? Hinata paused, looking at the blonde. He specializes in deception tactics, so he's very hard to read. He believes he can beat Sasuke, but he mostly practices the deadliest techniques because he says it takes more skill to leave an enemy alive than to kill them, but the best way to live long enough to gain that skill is to leave a trail of harmless corpses. He made a lot of noise at first to conceal his real skill, knowing Sasuke expects that, and is now remaining still and perfectly silent to convince Sasuke that he's really skilled and not going to make a mistake. Kakashi said thoughtfully, watching Sasuke orbit silently and Naruto just stand there.
That's not exactly it.
It's true Sasuke is bold and confident, but Naruto isn't so much drawing him into a multi-level web of deception as he is simply being cautious.
Naruto is not afraid of Sasuke, Hinata protested.
Perhaps that is true, but his skill with misdirection is largely because he works to hide himself, keeping any potential enemy, or in this case, Sasuke, from getting something he can use against him.
Naruto is full of confidence, Hinata again insisted.
That's true, Kakashi admitted, mollifying the increasingly distraught Kunoichi.
He believes in his mind absolutely.
However, he also knows that Sasuke is better at taijutsu than he is. So, he forced Sasuke to move cautiously, buying him time to gather all the information available and think it through. When he moves it will doubtlessly be to implement some well-reasoned plan. Sasuke had paused towards the edge of the pool, and crouched on the water, letting his hand fall silently through the water's surface as he rummaged around beneath his feet.
A trap? Maybe, no. Ah.
Pebbles, she said as Sasuke's hand emerged from the water, his other hand poised to catch the drip of water. Sasuke tossed 6 rocks in quick succession, making a series of splashes as if he'd suddenly darted forward, abandoning stealth for speed. Naruto twitched, a kunai springing into his hand as he started to throw, then stopped himself and carefully slid the kunai back into his jacket sleeve.
And the question is, Kakashi said thoughtfully, did he really almost forget and try to kill Sasuke, or did he just want to make me think that?
Think, probably, Hinata replied. Kakashi looked at her. She shrugged. I guess. Sasuke threw several more rocks, this time hard and fast, in a closely spaced arc that covered the area where he'd made the splashes. They sailed across the water to hit the soft earth on the other side with tiny thumps. Naruto chose that moment to start moving, stepping gingerly as he silently slid 4 feet to one side, coming within inches of the edge of the water.
Sasuke did likewise, once again crouching and rooting through the water for more rocks to throw.
Naruto, on the other hand, grabbed handfuls of dirt and started throwing them in the air as high as he could without making a telltale grunt of effort. However, the swish of his arm gave him away, and suddenly Sasuke was springing forward, scattering rocks before him.
Most hit the bank, but one bounced off Naruto's chest and hit the water with a plop.
Naruto dived to the left, channeling chakra as he hit the water with his shoulder, staying on the surface and rolling to his feet in an instant. Loose dirt mixed with larger clumps rained down as Sasuke charged, throwing a series of quick silent punches at where he thought Naruto was. He was quite close, Naruto having been unable to keep silent as he rolled, but Naruto had stepped forward to meet the onrush, and Sasuke attacked from the side, his blows coming inches from Naruto's back. They both froze, listening to the pattern of splashes at the dirt-hit water, none of it near them. But some of the sound was blocked by Sasuke, and Naruto suddenly spun, one leg coming up in a sweeping kick. At such close range, however, Sasuke heard the small movements of the cloth and breath, and countered with his own kick.
Their legs met with a horrific crack, right across each shin. Hinata winced at the impact.
A shiver ran up both boys' spine at the pain, and the legs were almost instantly retracted, chambering back with the foot near the hip as they assessed the damage. Near-identical snarls twisted their faces, and they simultaneously kicked again even harder. This time, the crack of shin against shin was even louder, punctuated by grunts.
They drew back and kicked again.
This time one leg was high and the other low, Sasuke kicking high, spinning with the miss, then leaping over Naruto's head and coming down with a double-fisted blow aimed at the blonde's head. Naruto's leg was low, falling short of Sasuke's by less than an inch, and he quickly stuck that foot to the water with chakra and launched a cross-scissor kick with his other, pushing himself forward with his right hand.
Sasuke's attack ended nearly a foot over his head, but Naruto heard the splashes as he landed.
He held himself still and silent. Sasuke, wary since he'd missed, silently stepped to one side, his hand reaching out for contact.
There was none.
The brief exchange had ended, and now, once again, neither knew where the other was. Naruto slowly changed his position into a crouch, hands and feet on the water. Then he began to concentrate. Sasuke walked silently back and forth, questing for his opponent, his steps getting faster and faster as he grew better at keeping silent. Naruto lifted one hand from the water, but it brought a rough globe of water nearly the size of a human head with it, stuck to it with chakra. Using his other hand, he quickly pinched off a series of handfuls, then let them fall back to the surface. Splash, splash, splash. Sasuke turned to the sound, but did not immediately run to the attack, wary of a trap. Splash, splash, splash. Sasuke slipped closer, gliding across the water as if he was on skates, a tricky application of chakra. Splash, splash, splash. Splash. Sasuke moved even more slowly, perfectly silently, never letting himself be off balance or unready. Naruto crouched again, both hands in the water on opposite sides, his face stern with concentration. Then, slowly, he stood up. And the surface of the pool came with him. It looked much like he was standing in the middle of a bed and had the blanket in each hand. As he stood, he pulled it up as two handfuls in a solid sheet. And like a sheet, pulling up in the middle drew back the edges, pulling everything closer to him as he did so. But water slid much more smoothly than a sheet, and Sasuke was unknowingly about 2 feet closer to Naruto than he thought. Seiya Swawuki. Naruto cooed. Surprise. Sasuke rose onto the balls of his feet and froze, his senses straining for some indication of the coming attack. How did Naruto know where he was? And suddenly Naruto spun, pulling at the water with all his strength and all his chakra. A Suiton master could have used a jutsu, but Naruto didn't know any water techniques, so all he could do was make it stick to him and itself, and pull. It was heavy, but he was strong, and he pulled hard. Like pulling a rug out from under someone, Sasuke suddenly found his footing unstable. He didn't curse in surprise, but he did stumble, making 2 small splashes as he did so, furiously channeling chakra as he tried to regain his balance. Naruto had no such problem, and was in the air in an instant, dropping the water as he did so. The resulting splash was tremendous, and the wave of water upset Sasuke just one more fraction of a second. Long enough for Naruto's flying tackle to hit. One arm was pinned to his body by Naruto's bear hug, and Naruto's legs wrapped around his waist at the same time, ankles locking behind his back. They toppled backwards to the water, both using chakra to stay on top. Cha! Naruto crowed in triumph despite the punch which thundered into his cheek as he did so. He threw his head back, taking another punch in the process, then slammed his protected forehead into Sasuke's face. Sasuke punched him 3 more times as he pulled his head back, then he did it again. And again, despite more punches. Yield! Yield, you basto WW! He yelled, then slammed his head into Sasuke's chin again, pressing his face to the dark-haired boy's neck as he tried to finish his declaration. You can't pry me loose, and you can't stop me without killing me. And I can take more pain than you. Yield! Sasuke punched him again, this time in the ear, and spit blood in his hair. Ow! What is it with you people and my damned ear? He slammed his head into Sasuke's face again. Kakashi chuckled at the sight of his 2 students beating each other bloody. So much for subtle, he noted wryly. I don't think deception is Naruto's real fighting style. More like bloody-minded hard-headedness. Hinata didn't say anything, watching in consternation as Naruto, the smartest, most devious person she knew, abandoned all pretense of style and thought and proceeded to continue to slam his bleeding head into Sasuke. Sasuke was getting more and more desperate. This wasn't fighting, this was 2 cats in a sack, sinking in a pond. Naruto's legs were making it harder and harder to gasp a breath, and he used his head like a club, heedless of the damage he was accruing himself. But he wasn't called a genius for nothing. So he took a deep breath, punched Naruto in the throat, making him gag, and changed the way he channeled chakra. They both sank slightly into the water, but then his flailing feet caught the shallow bottom and stuck as if it was a tree. Using the powerful muscles in his legs, he pulled himself, and Naruto, under. The surface of the water continued to ripple with the struggle below. Kakashi watched it with interest as the seconds ticked by, becoming a minute, then 2. Then 3. Then 4. "Ano, sensei, shouldn't we?" she asked hesitantly. He shrugged. They should be able to take 10 to 15 minutes underwater without significant brain damage, easy. I'll pull them out in, call it another 15 minutes. He gave her a reassuring smile. Another 2 minutes went by. The ripples were just as vigorous as before. "Sensei," she said worriedly. "Another 15. Don't worry, they'll be fine." Naruto burst to the surface, gasping, his blindfold askew, but still blinded by water and blood. Sasuke appeared on the water's surface behind him, still blindfolded, but in considerably better shape despite the cuts on his lips and chin. And he very deliberately waited a second, until Naruto had managed his clumsy climb back onto the water's surface, then kicked him very hard in the side. Naruto rolled across the water with a grunt of pain, then rolled more as he dodged the heavy stamps of Sasuke's feet, thankful for his new advantage of being able to see, however blurry. He rolled to his feet. And Sasuke made a certain movement with his left hand. Naruto ducked right and under, and 3 strands of ninja wire looped over his head, missing instead of entangling him. He pulled his own out with twin sweeps of both his arms, catching Sasuke's legs, then twisting his hands just so, making the wire kink and bind itself behind him, effectively hobbling him. But a sinuous whisper of wire against cloth alerted him to the return of Sasuke's coils of wire. There was very little time. Sasuke ignored his trapped legs for a moment, his split lips twisting into a smile as his wire encircled Naruto, then frowning as, instead of hard resistance, there was a brief tug before only gentle friction. A large splash at almost the same moment told him the story. He had pulled a kawarimi, swapping a chakra-laden ball of water for himself. And since you had to be touching water to put chakra in it, that made him. Naruto cursed silently to himself as Sasuke backflipped away from his rising uppercut. He pulled on his wire, but it was too late. Sasuke had already slipped the coils. "Alright, Naruto," Sasuke said calmly, controlling his breathing with some effort. He held his tongue, silently beginning his stalk of the Uchiha. Vision was going to be a tremendous advantage, and it wasn't exactly cheating. Sasuke had pulled his blindfold off himself as he'd raked Naruto's eyes underwater. He had no one to blame but himself. "I acknowledge you as the best of us 3 at leadership. If you have a suggestion, I will give it all due consideration," Sasuke proclaimed. "What?" Naruto's pack was unusually light for something supposedly well stocked with equipment for a mission, for all that it was as full as mine or Hinata's, but that just made him easier to carry. Hinata carried mine, an admittedly lighter burden than Naruto, but neither were exactly happy with our assignments. "You knocked him out, you carry him," Kakashi had said. "Fine." So now his arms were loosely draped to either side of my neck, and I supported him on my back by holding his thighs. It should have been more humiliating, but I just got through kicking the shit out of him, so it was okay. So now, we ran quickly and smoothly along little traveled roads, having exited the forest about half an hour after we resumed our trip. Naruto had been out for nearly 2 hours, a fact I took some pride in. I had put quite a lot of strength into that axe kick to the back of his head. It had been a thing of beauty. Even Hinata had congratulated me on it, which was slightly odd. He woke up, finally. He didn't move, didn't stiffen, didn't say anything, didn't change his breathing, or give any of the other telling signs of awareness. No, I knew he woke up when I caught a faint wave of killing intent, quickly clamped off. Deliberate? Accidental, but noticed? Irrelevant. I had already decided to mess with him. I kept carrying him.
I bet he didn't expect that. What would he do? Move to choke me? Reach for a kunai? Ride all the way to Tamahijiro? Something freaky, designed to unnerve me? Ha! If he moved to attack, I, naturally, had a little surprise for him. Wire, looped around his neck and down to my fingers. I could let go of his legs and pull on that wire in an instant, and he'd be forced to let go or be garrote, and at the speed I was running, he'd be falling to the ground as I ran ahead, plus I'd probably just hold on to the wire and pull him along by his neck, garroting him anyway, which I found a pleasing mental image. If he didn't try to attack me, well, I'd just have to see what the path of most inscrutability would be. Because I had Naruto's measure. It's amazing what inspirations you can have in the early morning darkness, keeping watch. So, I just kept running. After about 5 minutes, I felt him tense, and the killing intent was back. My fingers tightened on the wire. And then it choked off again. Naruto was pretty unhappy. Heh, this was kind of fun. Completely unseemly, incredibly degrading, but fun, and oh so completely worth it. Then I felt his weight shift, but not like he was moving. He just changed shape. And suddenly, instead of a flat chest leaned against my back, there were 2 large, soft lumps being squished between us. I'm ashamed to say it actually took me a moment to understand what he'd done. I'm even more ashamed to admit that I blushed. Seems like he took the freaky route. But okay, I can deal. My blush faded. So, Naruto has breasts. Big deal. Hinata has breasts, too. Perhaps infinitesimally smaller, but nicer because they're real. Or something. Shit, I was blushing again. This is not helping. I mentally shook myself, and Sensei slowed us down again to a walking pace to allow us to gain our breath. Faye, as if I needed a break. Hinata didn't look like she was having any trouble, and Naruto certainly didn't need a break, the lazy bastard. This was about the point Hinata looked over and gasped. Naruto. You're a girl. She shook her head and changed her pace to come to my side. Is your head all right? Tee-hee. Naruto giggled. Who's Naruto? I'm Naruko. She giggled again, though not quite as annoyingly. Who are you and where are we going? Naruto, there is something wrong with you, I noted quietly. Now was about the time I suppose I'm supposed to put him down and let Hinata tend to him, but I didn't do that. Hinata giggled. Sasuke, you know Naruto is just making a joke. I stand behind my words. Long silence. I could actually hear Naruto pout. Well, if I'm so messed up, why are you still carrying me? She said, and she sounded genuinely curious. You have nice tits, I replied neutrally. Thought of that line right after Hinata gasped. Sensei actually stumbled when I said that. Hinata froze and fell back out of sight, so I don't know what she did. I walked on. I thought about shifting one hand and squeezing her ass, but I doubt Naruto's surprise would be worth having to cut off my own hand. Duly noted, Sasuke, Naruto said, with a note of something indefinable in her voice. Admiration? Respect? Her hand snaked down my chest and traced my muscles as her breath suddenly grew loud in my ear, close enough to tickle the tiny hairs. Thank you. A girl likes to know her assets are appreciated by the sexy man in the group. And she bit my ear. I nearly dropped her, doubtlessly the idea, but I didn't, since I had a ready counter literally at my fingertips. Gurk was all she said. She let go of my ear pretty quick after that, and I held the tension for another few moments before I let the wire loosen around her neck. Oddly, Naruto seemed to think the ride was over after that, and nearly fell on her cute little ass in her haste to get to her own feet and the wire from around her neck, leaking killing intent in little fits and starts the whole time. Naruto dropped the jutsu and resumed his shape as a boy as he shucked the wire and threw it in tangles on the ground, his hands actually shaking as he did so.
He gave me another look I couldn't hope to decipher and stomped off ahead of us. Hinata looked at me, then Naruto, with fear, confusion, and hurt, clearly started to go after him, then just as visibly hesitated. She finally scurried after him with a final backwards glance at me that said she would be having words with me later.
Kakashi-sensei looked at me. Was it something I said? I asked. Mentally, I ticked another check. Me too, Naruto 0. Oh, yeah. I had Naruto's measure. Hinata had to run hard to catch up with Naruto, who'd managed to disappear quickly after he'd gotten only 100 yards in front of the rest of the group. Using her Byakugan let her catch a glimpse as he fled into the woods, and she quickly followed. Still, it took several moments before she found him again. Actually, there were two of him, and for one heart-wrenching moment, she thought it was the real one that had one of Naruto's guardless wakizashis in his ear. Blood trickled down from where the razor-sharp steel was being slowly pressed through the thin flesh and bone, and his eyes were screwed shut in pain and effort as he struggled to break the arm lock the other Naruto had him in. But no, Naruto wouldn't do that. Hinata had perfect confidence in him. Still, he was doing something she'd never have imagined. Finally, the blade broke through the bone with a quick convulsive thrust, reaching deep enough to hit something lethal, and the clone disappeared with a poof. The real Naruto flinched as if it had been him under the knife when it had suddenly gained those last inches. Absently he wiped the pristine blade on his pants leg and slid it into its sheath behind his back before collapsing onto the ground and hanging his head. Slowly, Hinata drew forward and sat with her legs crossed to his side, close, but not touching. He didn't look at her. She began hesitantly. Did you forget to make the S-Shadow clone look like him? Hinata, you're stuttering again, he snapped. She recoiled as if slapped, pressing her hands to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock and hurt. It took her a moment to get to her feet, as she nearly lost her balance in her rush to rise, but there was barely time for Naruto to see the first few tears glimmering in her so-pale eyes before she leapt for the trees and was gone. Shit! He cried. Kagebushin no Jutsu. Followed a split second later, and the new clone was still forming, not even able to raise its hands in self-defense before Naruto's blade split its right eye on the journey to the brain, and for a second it lingered between forming and unforming, hated it and hated himself, chakra looping and twisting in upon itself. Caught in the feedback loop, Naruto stiffened like he'd just cut a live wire. Darkness claimed him. I must confess, I sort of thought Kakashi-sensei was going to have something witty or insightful to say. Instead, he whipped out his book and proceeded to ignore the hell out of me. Perhaps that's a lesson in and of itself. I should pick up some reading material next time. A particularly loud brush of leaves against each other shook me out of my musings to see Hinata standing in the road, her face in her hands. She stood like that for a long moment before clearly sighing and dropping her hands, turning to walk our direction in the next breath. I watched her with an expression of mild disinterest, though I was curious what she'd say. Naruto is close to a group of 3 small silverleaf trees 730 yards that direction, she said as she drew even with Kakashi-sensei, pointing behind her as she walked. He wants some time to himself. How much time? I asked, smirking just the tiniest bit. We don't have all day. Holy shit, I forgot Shanash Sneaver. I felt like I was moving through syrup. I blinked and then she was there, her hand striking for my chest. I twisted, bringing my arms up to sweep hers aside, but instead of the 2-fingered Juken strike she grabbed my arm, her hands moving as fast as sensei does sometimes when he wants to make a point. And then her shin connected across my lower stomach, her hands pulled, and the world did this funny spinning thing and I was on my back with Hinata kneeling on my chest with one hand on my throat and her finger pointed at my head for one heart-stopping moment. I saw death in that finger. And the finger curled as the hand made a fist which connected very quickly with my split lip, which had finally stopped bleeding about an hour ago. Then it hit my eye. So, I punched her. Nothing fancy, just a right cross to her jaw that snapped her head to the side and sent blood spraying. Pretty strong, that punch. Pretty satisfying. It hurt a lot when she hit the nerve junction in my right shoulder and I couldn't use that arm anymore. Kakashi-sensei usually calls out cripple strikes when she makes them, and I continue the fight appropriately. The actual experience is a little different. Naruto is right. Right. There really is no substitute for actually trying to kill each other. Naturally, she hit me in the face again. So, I punched her again, this time with my left, and this time I really gave it to her with a nice solid tap on her temple, right behind one of those wild, wide, incredibly crazed eyes of hers. It should have knocked her out cold. Instead, she hit the nerve junction in my left shoulder. All in all, I could have planned this better. And, she hit me again. Probably trained in this technique with Naruto. What the hell is it with Naruto and his stupid-ass ideas on trading blows to the face? I could just see the two of them, wrestling with each other out at one of the training grounds, trading full-force blows to the face. It'd be just like Naruto to think that up. And it'd be just like Hinata to go along with it. Lacking any better option at the moment, I decided to point out the pointlessness of this exercise in futility to our Jounin-sensei. Not that teeing this isn't fun GRK, but shouldn't we NNG be moving again? I asked in what I hoped was a normal conversational voice, twisting my head to both avoid another blow and send a meaningful look his direction. Kakashi looked up from his book and smiled, at least I think it was a smile, at me. Nah, it's fine. I booked extra time for this sort of thing. Proper mission planning is essential, I agreed thickly as Hinata punched me in the mouth again. Stars exploded behind my eyes. That one had a touch of jukin to it. Hinata grabbed my hair with her hand and shook my head lightly. Look at me, 3 Hinatas hissed. You have my attention, I admitted truthfully. All of them did. I don't know what you said or did to Naruto, but you need to listen to me. She gave my head a little shake, which made my vision swim just that much more. Never, ever, never do it again. Are you finished? I asked. She stopped, blinked, and frowned. Good. I kicked upward with my right leg hard enough to throw her body upwards, though her hand was still locked into the fabric of my shirt at my throat, so it wound up making her do a sort of handstand on my neck. My left knee shot up faster than she was moving and slammed into her sternum, forcing all her breath out with a woof and hastening her arc to land on her back. I kicked with my foot against the ground, spinning myself around while she curled around her stomach, writhing in pain, and dropped a heel right across the side of her head with, I admit, a certain amount of vindictiveness. That time, she stopped moving. I quickly flipped to my feet, my arms still flopping uselessly at my sides. I frowned at the unconscious Kunoichi. And a little advice to you, I replied. Never, ever, never try that again. Kakashi-sensei looked up from his book again. It kind of loses its sting when they're unconscious, you know. I glared at him, and I could already feel my eyes swelling shut. You gonna carry her now? He asked. My reply was simple and definite. No. Let Naruto do it, when he got back from his cry or his planning session or whatever the hell he was doing. Don't do it, Hinata, he warned. What, like a fool? I glanced at the ground first, where, of course, she was no longer laying. A blur appeared in the corner of my vision. Very, very slowly, I turned just enough to see that it was a hand, 2 fingers extended, pointing at my temple. Next time, I'm just going to kill you, Hinata said quietly, the fire gone from her voice. There won't be a next time, I warned. Kakashi picked that moment to stand, closing his book as he did so. Well then, so long as we all understand each other, he said brightly. The streets were clean, the buildings looked newly painted, and throngs of people bustled about, each one intent on his or her own little mission, but the buzz of polite, meaningless conversation filled the air. The only strange thing about the city was that there was no sky. Instead of white clouds and a yellow sun and pale blue sky, it was dark. But it wasn't like night, with a field of star-splattered velvet.
And it wasn't like a cloudy, pitch-black moonless night either.
Instead, up just kind of kept going up, until up was indefinable and lost. There was light, though. Plenty of light. The colors were cheery and bright, and the people had ready smiles on their faces when they saw each other. There weren't any dark alleys or shadowed expressions. Oh, wait. There was one more strange thing about the city. All of the people, from the stumbling, barely toddling along little girl, to the man selling figs and plums under an awning, to a curvaceous woman attracting lustful glances, to a teenage boy and a teenage girl holding hands, they all had his face. Nah. Not all that strange. The lack of sky was what was really weird. Naruto wandered aimlessly among the people, never being jostled or impeded despite the numbers, just another Naruto in the crowd, staring up at the strange, skyless, up. None of the rest of him looked up. It was like they couldn't see it. Admittedly, he couldn't see it either, so he finally gave up and started looking around him. People. So many people. And every one of them had his face set incongruously on top of whatever body they had been graced with. They were all talking, nearly constantly, just a continuous flow of words that individually had meaning but when listened to sequentially failed to say anything at all. It was comforting, really. He liked it here. There was one place, though, that none of him went. Almost against his will, he found himself going there. The crowd just stopped, and he walked along a now deserted street, heading for the biggest building in the whole city. It was huge, like a warehouse the size of Konoha. It had a wall around it, and a rusty gate hanging slightly ajar. He slipped inside the gate and immediately saw a door set into the side of the building. It was a normal-sized door, but it seemed incredibly tiny against the immense vastness of the side of the building. He opened it and stepped in. The warehouse was empty. If it seemed huge from the outside, it was even bigger from the inside. The walls stretched away forever from him, and the far side was a hazy promise rather than something he could actually see. A row of colossal fans were set into the wall far off to his right, turning slowly, their blades chopping the fading orange light filtering in from the outside. But despite the appearance of being in a building, the ceiling was just like the sky outside. It wasn't there. Naruto wandered in, following no set path, though he didn't appear to get near any wall, even the one he'd come in from. Or, at least, the one he thought he'd come in from. He stared upwards the entire time, searching for some sign of rafters or roof or anything, but there was nothing but more gloom and nothingness. Why do you look up? Naruto whirled around, staring, looking for the source of the voice. It appeared to come from everywhere and nowhere, ageless and genderless at the same time. Why do you look up? The voice repeated. Again, Naruto couldn't find the source of the voice. Hesitantly, he opened his mouth and replied. Because there's nothing there? He hazarded. Why don't you look around? Because there's nothing there either, he replied. You see nothing and you want to look at nothing? The voice asked, sounding incredulous and slightly contemptuous. Naruto felt stupid. Look, what else is there? He demanded. Try looking down. Blinking, Naruto did just that, and was startled to find himself on the edge of a hole in the ground, maybe 10 feet across, with a sharp slope down along one edge, leading into the darkness. There was a fox sitting primly along one edge, tail curled around its hips. It had red fur and a pale chest, and couldn't have been more than a foot tall. It looked at him. Its eyes were bright. He stared at it. You? He asked. Were you the one talking? The fox didn't say anything. It just kept looking at him, following him as he walked around the rim of the hole to the slope. He paused, looking at the fox. I guess I'm supposed to go down, huh? He asked. It just kept looking at him. Naruto swallowed nervously, then went down. That's it for this reading.
Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfiction.
Looking forward to having you on board again.